Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Gary Boomer. Hi, Gary. Thank you for being on this episode of the Boomer Briefing Podcast.
Hi, John.
Gary is the founder of Boomer Consulting. I think he goes by the title Chief Connector as well. And he specializes in a few different areas, but innovation and growth and really helping firms push their thinking forward in all sorts of areas. And so the title of today's episode is why you need to know about the 4 C's. And you may be thinking, well, what are the 4 C's? Well, this is a concept that Gary and I are excited to talk about. So Gary, first question for you, what are the 4 C's and why should firms really understand this concept?
Well, let me give you a little background here, John. As some of you know, I've been in Strategic Coach Dan Sullivan's program for several years. And this idea and concept really came out of Strategic Coach, but how to apply it to the accounting profession took me a year or so to kind of figure out. And some of you have even seen our chart on the continuum of value. And that continuum really starts on the left-hand side with transactional work, moving on to compliance work, and then advisory and consulting. And as you go from left to right, you deal with different issues. On the left side of that chart with transactional and compliance issues, you're really dealing with capacity today. And probably the timing of this podcast is very important because many people are just coming out of the busy tax season. So they've totally understand compliance and capacity. Well, compliance is not one of the words, but capacity is. And the other 3 words are capability, which people will understand, and courage and commitment. And I'll talk a little bit more about each. But as you move across that continuum and think of the clients you're doing advisory and consulting services for, that really takes capability. And those capabilities are different than the capabilities required of the compliance work. And we often hear 2 reasons why firms are not growing in the advisory and the consulting area of their practice, yet that's where 90-some% of the growth is coming in the large firms. And the reason they give me, number 1, is we don't have time to do it. And number 2, our people don't want to be advisors and consultants. And that's not all, that's too general, but some people just prefer the compliance. So it does take different capabilities to become more advisory and consulting. So those are the 2. You may have some comments about that, John, because I know you're very familiar with the continuum of value.
Right. So the 4 C's of capacity, capability, courage, and commitment, and how you order those or think about those as it relates to transactional and compliance services are different than maybe how you order those for advisory and consulting services. So Gary, for the firms that are really looking to move into the advisory and consulting space, truly, what would be your recommendation to them in how they order those 4 C's?
Okay, that's a great question, John. And it's one an entrepreneur finds easy to answer, but people that have been in a organization like a large accounting firm or government have a difficult time, because the first C is really courage. It takes courage to change from being a compliance accountant to an advisor and a consultant. Now, I might say, well, I really enjoy what I'm doing in compliance, but think again about how that's being automated and how valuable does your client perceive that today, and how much more valuable they would perceive and appreciate you if you were over in the advisory and consulting role. So number one is that courage. Number two is commitment, is saying, we're going to do it. And the problem is that we're so used to having confidence and the capability in the compliance work that we tend not to want to work over to the right of the chart and do the advisory and consulting services. So you really have to provide training to people, and you have to get the order correct, or you will just continue to procrastinate and do the same things that you've always done and be kind of caught in your own busy work.
I was just talking with a firm, Gary, that is really intentionally moving forward into consulting with their clients. And what you're saying rings absolutely true, that more important than them feeling like they had the capacity to do it, or even the capability to do that consulting work, is they first had the courage to commit to that and go out, deliver a consulting engagement or two, and through that process, develop the capability and the capacity to do more of it. And so too often, I think firms not sit around, but they wait for magically to have the courage to commit to something like this before they actually take action. And so I think what you're saying rings really true. Any additional comments or thoughts on that, Gary?
Well, the tendency is, I'm going to try. Well, you've really got to commit. And this is, advisory and consulting work is much different than compliance. In compliance, you're typically the smartest person in the room. That's the reason they came to you, is because you understand the tax law, or you understand reporting regulations and requirements. But when you get over to advisory, you're helping the client think. You're thinking about the future rather than the accuracy of the past. And you can predict the future from the past, but it's kind of a totally different environment, and some of the easiest services to deliver because of your trust with the client, firms just aren't doing today. And that's what the client really wants. If you sit down and talk to your very best clients, and I mean, don't listen to the bottom clients. They're not going to get you to where you want to be in the future. Listen to your very best clients, and they will tell you what their problems are and what's keeping them up at night. And that's where you need to get the capacity to solve those problems for them. And yes, it's different, but you're going to continue to be commoditized in the compliance area, in my opinion, by automation and increased regulation that are really taking the profit out of some of that work.
Yeah. So, Gary, would you say firms are at risk if they don't embrace this 4C model?
Yes, I would say that they are at risk of losing their edge and losing their relevance, because the compliance work, as I say, is being automated and commoditized in the profession.
Right. Another angle of this that I think is related is, our profession is a very permission-based profession. We feel like we need permission from someone else in order to deliver certain services, right? And that really goes away when you start to truly move into, let's say, consulting. is you don't need permission from anyone to have courage and commitment, on something. And too often we wait around and maybe um, want someone to be able to tell us that we can actually go do that. And one example of that, Gary, is I'm working with a firm as they take a strategic planning as a service to their best clients. And once we had that conversation about not needing permission from anyone to to offer that service, that they have what it takes to be able to deliver that, and their clients will fully think it's normal that they're offering a strategic planning service. And sure enough, after the first conversation with one of their best clients, the client said, well, I've been waiting for you to offer this service because we've needed this for a while, and it makes perfect sense that you would be the one to facilitate this for us since you know our business in and out. And so that was kind of an eye opener for that firm of like, we've been sitting around waiting for permission from someone to, do this. And all along, all we needed was the courage and commitment to start to have the conversations with clients. And now it's off and rolling. So
That's simply mindset, John. And the
Mhm.
mindset that we have as the profession is that we have to have permission. We have to be able to do that under GAAP or GAS or under the tax law. But here's how we have to change the mindset. It's pretty simple. We have to quit thinking about protection of the profession and protection of my personal license, but think about how we're going to add value, how we're going to use our market and our capabilities in that market to increase our value. And those services oftentimes are 10, 20 times what are other services that we're doing in the compliance world. You're also going to have to change your business model, because charging by the hour in that advisory and compliance world is not going to get you the returns that you deserve.
Yep. And when I'm working with firms on this, Gary, I often use the phrase, you owe it to your clients to be good at this. You owe it to your clients to have the courage and commitment to develop and deliver higher value services to them. And a lot of firms, as they engage in these types of conversations about moving to advisory and consulting and, all that, they typically don't think about owing it to their clients to be good in this area, you know? And I think when firms start to think about, wait, if we are really interested in client service and we're really interested in bettering the lives of our clients, improving their quality of life, improving the performance of their business, then we owe it to them to understand the 4 C's here and, understand that we need to have the courage and commitment to grow in this area, make some of the hard decisions, maybe do some things that are uncomfortable because it's in their best interest that we do that. Um,
Absolutely. And I think the PPP money and the consulting and advisory services we provided is a great example, in that many of the biggest obstacles were CPAs trying to apply knowledge about the taxability of forgiveness on loans and other things associated with that program up front. And it was really a different stimulus package. It was presented to save jobs. And once we changed our mindset, we became kind of the front lines of that problem. And we really provide a heck of a lot more service and value to those clients than, say, the banks did that issued the loans. Now, some people got reasonable fees for that. Other people thought it was just part of their normal service agreement. So there's no right answer. I'm not here for that, but I do think that presented and has proven that the CPA profession is valued by small business and they want more advice.
right. So, Gary, as we round out our conversation here and in this episode, for our listeners, what's your one kind of recommended next step or piece of advice that once they hang up listening to this podcast, that they could go do to implement some learnings here?
Well, I think one thing is that they need to kind of plan this future out, and they need to take the time to think, envision what they want to be, do, have, experience, and create as a firm. And I know, having been a partner in a regional firm, that there are going to be differences of opinion. And I would just warn you that sometimes your traditional or old line service partners are going to be the most difficult to convince, because they want to continue doing what they're doing and grow that. But the resources tell me we really need to focus more on advisory and consulting and change our marketing message in order to grow. And the traditional compliance and transaction work will be part of this. So it's not going to be an or proposition. It's going to be an and proposition. And how you package and price this in the future is going to be critical to your success.
That's great, Gary. And as always, it's great having you on this podcast. So thank you for making yourself available and for having such a great conversation here. For our listeners, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. So if you like the conversation here, like these topics, please subscribe and know that every Tuesday morning we will be releasing a new episode. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned.